refugee camp in Lebanon? I'm like, yeah, sure. Fuck it, why not? And so I did, and so I ended up going to this place called Shatila, and Shatila was it's sort of infamous because during the Lebanese Civil War, it was the site of a particularly bad massacre. So essentially the Israelis invaded to disarm the PLO, they surrounded the camp, and then they were allied with this Christian militia. The Christian militia went in and basically killed a lot of people over the course of a couple of days. Sorry, that's kind of a little dark for this night, but it kind of gives you the idea of what it's going into, and so the camp, I think even today, is essentially closed off, right? So there's no Lebanese civil services or public services that go into the camp. There's no police force. There's no garbage pickup. No, basic public amenities. And once you go inside, you're completely divorced from sort of the outside Beirut. Though oddly, it's actually one of the nicest, safest places I've ever stayed. So then I guess because not many of you have been to the Middle East before, and I had been to the Middle East before, but I'd never been in this sort of environment before. And I remember sort of like showing up and then sort of realizing like, man, I'm going to go work in this camp for the next few months. Is this really a good idea for an American to do? And the people who were taking me to the camp show up, and they show up in this car, and it's literally missing the floor and the front passenger seat, and there's these holes in it that look, I'm not going to say they were bullet holes, but they look a lot like bullet holes. And it's sort of rough guy in the front passenger seat, the front driver's seat. And I get in, I'm a little nervous, and he says, so you're from Hollywood? I'm like, I guess. And he says, that's interesting. I'm like, it is? It's like, my friend and I, we have this bet. I'm like, okay. And he was like, do you think Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez are going to stay together? To which, of course, I respond, yeah, of course, they'll never break up. Which I tell for two purposes. One, which is that I'm really shitty at predicting the future, especially when it comes to celebrity relationships. But the second is that most cultural differences are, for the most part, exaggerated. Most people in most of the world are mostly the same. So don't always believe the propaganda, don't always believe the hype most of the time. People talk about, oh, we can't integrate them, their culture is so much more different than ours. It's just propaganda there to serve the people entrenched and in power. And if you realize that, that will serve you very well in life as well as in business. And that's, I'll get on to the next point. So then I was in Shatila, and Palestinians in Lebanon at the time were banned from about 75 different professions, everything from taxi driver to cop to everything else. And in the interest of time and not boring you to death, eventually at some point of working there, I kind of reached this breaking point where I was really pissed off about the lack of opportunity and what I saw as wasted human potential. So I decided to do something about it. And I think most people would probably join an NGO or something like that, but my mom had worked for the Center for Middle East Peace in DC, and most of what a lot of NGOs do, I have a lot of respect for a lot of them, but a lot of them, they get stuck in this cycle of just trying to fundraise. Or in the case of my mom, just throwing a lot of really fancy dinner parties for politicians that didn't actually do anything in the end. And then my dad was a diplomat and, could go work for government, but I'd sort of seen the dark side of that, right? Because ultimately your interest when you're working for a government is not human interest, it's national interest. And that's fine and good, but it's not something I wanted to do. So I started looking around and I was like, this is ridiculous too. There's all these NGOs dedicated to education or eating vegan or whatever. And I was like, that's not what these people need. They need jobs, right? That's ridiculous. I mean, we could educate them all day, and then what happens? You stay at home with your PhD on the wall and you can't get a job. That's not what anyone wants. So I decided to, I had this genius idea. I was like, you know something, in LA, I noticed that hookahs, they sell for like $200 a piece, and I can buy them out of Syria for like $6 a piece. I'm going to start a company, and I'm going to work with my friends here in Shatila and also back in LA, and we're going to create this company importing hookahs into LA. And my big idea was, oh, you know what else we'll do? We're going to sell directly to the cafes in LA, because why not turn them all into, you know, shisha bars, right? We'll get to that point in a sec. So I took a loan from my dad. I had a previous company that was relatively successful, and I took all the money from that, and I basically prepared myself to live on cup of noodle soup for the next 6 months and basically be super poor. And so I started the company with these 3 friends of mine. One of whom would actually eventually end up joining Hezbollah, but in the interest of keeping you all sort of waiting till the end, I'll describe them, and then you can try and guess which one's going to become a terrorist. That's a fun game. So there's Steve, and Steve was from California, and Steve came from a lot of money, and he was a fun guy, kind of a party guy. There was Ali, who was a little bit religious, a little bit conservative. And then there was Samar, who was sort of one of my best friends. We would go out to bars a lot and hit on a lot of women. Sorry if that's too much information. So Ali and Samar would manage the supply chain. And then Steve and I were the capital and would handle sales. And so then our first sort of obstacle popped up, which was, you know, I discovered that hookahs were actually illegal to import into the U.S., right? So that was my idea, right? I shut down all this other stuff, and I discovered that 3 years earlier, George W. Bush had passed this drug paraphernalia law, and hookahs had been interpreted by customs for the last 3 years as being drug paraphernalia, like a bomb or something. And I was like, that's stupid, right? One, these have been used for tobacco purposes for like forever, for hundreds of years. And two, that's a complete waste of weed if you think that using a hookah to smoke herb is ever going to work. So I argued with U.S. Customs, and I won. Okay, so if you look up my name on the customs ruling on this line search system, this badly written legal memo by me before I was a lawyer will pop up, and they're ruling in my favor. So the reason I tell that is sort of 2 lessons. 1, government loves stupid regulations. But 2, laws aren't permanent. You can change them if you push hard enough. And one of the sort of important things to keep in mind is that simply because something is a law, it doesn't mean you can't challenge it, it doesn't mean you can't change it. Right? The world is ruled by people who are mostly dumber than you are. They just happen to have enough arrogance or narcissism to think that they can sort of rule the world how they feel, so you just have to challenge them. So anyway, so then I'll get back to the story a little bit. So Ali drops out because he somehow has this problem with selling intoxicating instruments and cancer-causing stuff to people in LA, which leaves Samar as the only person to run our supply chain. So he's running our supply chain, and but he sends the stuff over, and then the second problem popped up. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what order it is. There it is. Okay. All right. So then the next problem with our idea pops up, which is that I forgot that in LA we have this tobacco ordinance. Right? So my big idea about like selling hookahs to cafes couldn't actually do it, right? Because you can't smoke inside a cafe, and the only places that had these shisha bars had gotten them through this essentially loophole in local ordinance. Which brings me to another important lesson in business. Always make sure to check the regulation, even though regulations are stupid. Never underestimate how stupid government is. At every single level of your product segment, right? because all of a sudden I end up with like thousands of hookahs in Los Angeles County, and I'm like, I can't sell them to anyone except on a personal basis or sell them to like head shops, right? And to sell them to head shops, like tobacco shops, I would have to drive, because it's LA, in traffic for like 45 minutes at a time to sell like 10, 15, 20 hookahs, which was completely not going to take me out of poverty. I was still going to be eating cup noodle soup. And then, you know, this was sort of in the days before e-commerce was really easy, so we'd sell them on the other stuff on Craigslist. And, you know, people would show up, and they'd like take like an hour to figure out what they wanted to buy, and then, you know, they eventually figure it out, but I'm like, great, I made $50, and you've been here for like an hour, this freaking sucks, right? So then that was part of the problem. But then the other problem was that, so Salma was the only person managing our supply chain. And when the hookahs showed up, half of them didn't fit the different component parts, right? So the Ross, like the head of the pipe, like didn't fit the neck, didn't fit the base, right? So I've got like thousands of hookahs, half of which don't fit together, right? I have no place to sell them, and like you know, it was just kind of disaster. But we somehow managed to hack it, and we you know, I figured out how to use electrical tape to make the pieces fit together, and we somehow were still able to sort of carry on. Until one day, I go into this head shop, and I look down, and I'm about to, you know, like, I've got your like 50 hookahs here or whatever. And the dude's like, oh yeah, we don't really need those anymore. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, there's this Chinese company, and they brought these hookahs, and they're like $20 a piece, which was pretty much my cost of shipping, and they were like perfect. They like fit together perfectly. They came in their own like silver carrying case, and I was like, oh man, we are screwed. So then that was pretty much the end of the company, because there's no way I was going to compete against this Chinese firm, which much better hookahs that were much cheaper than ours. So the next lesson is always think about your barriers to competition. If your barrier to competition was the fact that hookahs were illegal to bring into the United States, then suddenly making them legal kind of destroys your barrier to competition. Right? So, you know, so that's pretty much the story of how the company failed. And I've told a few lessons to help you guys sort of learn on a practical basis of you know, the different lessons of what goes into a company and how your companies fail, but I guess the bigger points I'm trying to make really happened after the company failed. So the company failed, and so I decided to go to law school, because even though apparently I wasn't so good at running an import-export company, I was kind of decent at changing the law, right? So I decided to, you know, go to law school, and going to law school was probably one of the better things that I did. And it's, you know, how do I put this? My life isn't so bad right now, right? Obviously, I just flew in from Dubai to give like a session on investing in gaming, you know, because I was speaking on a panel there. You know, my company, like, it's crazy. I like wake up some days, I'm like, how the fuck is this real? Like, we were on the front page of like the Wall Street Journal like a few months ago. Like Becky Anderson from CNN flies to Jordan to interview my CEO. It's a company that I started like 3 years ago. But none of that stuff would have happened if this company hadn't failed in the first place, right? So I guess kind of the point I'm trying to make is this: the sun also rises. At the time, I thought it was the greatest disaster on ever. Right? I never really failed at anything. I was like, failure? What? And the other thing is that knowledge is never really wasted, right? The experience is never really wasted. The road is really long, and the things you learn in one part of your life often come back and are completely usable again later in your life. So yeah, I guess, I should probably tell you who ended up joining Hezbollah. Because that's kind of the fun part of the story, right? So the reason I kind of bring this up is one of the other sort of metas I was trying to get across is like, sort of like the point of trying to predict the future, right? And the difference between strategy and implementation or execution, right? The difference between theoretical and reality. And that you can try and predict things all day, but ultimately there's always some aspect of reality that will always pop up. You know, so in some ways I'm really crappy at predicting, like for instance, celebrity relationships. But I did make sort of two major predictions in 2003. One was that eventually I felt that I wrote to my friends and family about this. I was like, the Cold War is over. There's all these leftist groups, secular groups in Shatila that used to have power and control the camp. And now that they've lost power, we're in danger of having radical, you know, Salafists and other sort of groups, religious groups come in. And so that happened, right? So 7 years ago, I go back to Shatila, and there used to never be any Hezbollah flags anywhere. And then all of a sudden, they're everywhere. And then I called up, it's not his real name, but I've changed all the names, but Samar, I call up Samar. And I'm like, hey Samar, how you doing? It's been like 7 years. And he's like, oh, things are good. You joined Hezbollah. It's like, but aren't you an atheist? And he was like, yeah, well, I don't tell them that, but I tell them, you know, I'm like, you know, Sunni Muslim, and I'm like, but hold up, but they're Shia. And he was like, yeah, but they've got like a whole brigade of us. We've got like Christians, and like Sunni, like we've got a whole like division. And I'm like, that's wonderful, they're so religiously tolerant. Still not sure how I feel about this, but yeah, I guess we can go in here. And then the other one was Syria, and at the time I you know, wrote it that I was like, Syria is eventually going to collapse. And you know, when you're 20, it was like 22, 23, it seems like this real theoretical thing, right? Like, oh, what does it mean to talk about the collapse of a country? And then it happened, and it's weird, right? Because you realize that it's not this theoretical thing. There's people who actually die. There's places that are destroyed that you used to walk in. And realizing that the nature of reality is always different than the theoretical, and there's an emotional element to business, to the world, is, I think, a very important life lesson for us all. But sorry if this wasn't the most coherent talk. One, beer. Two, I just got off a flight like literally 5 hours ago, and I kind of wrote my notes in the back there. So I guess that's pretty much it. Just any questions? I don't know what else. What do I do next? Tell me what I do.